Steve from XR Richmond, who is he's involved in several things apart from XR Richmond, so he's heavily involved in the XR UK's Dirty Water campaign. He's also on the working group for citizens' assemblies and on the working group for community assemblies. Have I missed anything out? Are we sure? And we were both this morning at Africa Energy Summit at 6:45 outside in South Bank. So
you're a bit tired.
a bit tired, but here. So I think I will just hand over to.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you for inviting me. I don't propose to stand up too much because I'll get away from the screen. Yeah, we discussed how this might be presented. So we started off from the aspect of the wand. So it seems a bit facetious, somebody coming from Richmond to tell you lot about the wand. But anyway, we'll have a go. And I want to lead into what the Dirty Water campaign is going to be doing. We're going to be issuing Dirty Water Wave 6 next week with a bit of luck. But I've nicked some slides from there, but they're actually a presentation, they're in preparation. Most of our material is actually, for those of you from XR, is in the River Toolkit, which is open access. Anybody can log into that and get information. Next. To start with the Wandle, I mean, most of you will be familiar with some of this history. The fact that for a short river of about 12 miles long, it's actually had such a heavy industrial impact all through its history, as far as we can tell, going back to Roman times. Because it's a chalk stream and the water is very pure, and because the water drops from the North Downs, from where it rises, to the Thames, where it enters the Thames, there's a drop of something like 13 metres, I think, along that course. So the river actually flows very quickly, and it's very, very helpful to water mill power, which is why it's had all these activities along its banks. The river ceased to become very industrial about towards the end of the 19th century, and the Liberty Crude Works was one of the last four. I think it was the last of four that carried on into the 20th century, and that was shut in 1982. That was down in Colliers Wood. Thanks. Because of all this activity, of course, the Wandle's always been afflicted by pollution all through its history, probably. It was at different times. It was people just sent effluent into the river from the big house, the grand houses down in Malden Hall and places like that at the top end of the river. And there was always waste from the industrial activities that were taking place along its length, which obviously got worse when they got more industrialised in the 17th and 18th centuries. And through the 19th century and the early 20th century, it got worse and worse, and it was dubbed an open sewer in the 1960s. And it was a dead river to all intents and purposes. But the thing is about the Wandle is that because it's a chalk stream, because the water's so pure where it rises, and because it's self-cleansing to quite a large extent, a lot of this goes unnoticed, or has gone unnoticed. And what's happened in recent years is that there are a lot of, mapped and unmapped discharge points, particularly in the upper one, going into the Croydon area and around Beddington, before we get to the sewage plant. And then the treatment works at Beddington have been a prolific offender of putting sewage into the river. And also there's thought to be, one of my sources said that there was a lot of wrongly connected new developments in that northwest Croydon area and in northeast Sutton, where it's thought that a lot of sewage pipes from housing developments are actually connected to the water drainage. So there's unchecked effluent going into the river, and nobody can resolve that. You have to go around house by house and work out where your sewage is pumped in. And there's a big problem because it's an urban river and it's accessible at all points, really, with domestic fly tipping and dumping of construction rubbish. Sorry, you had a question.
I was going to say, if it's been wrongly connected, I mean,
Oh, they should be. But if the builders have done it and the ground's closed over it, or the house has gone up on top of it, or whatever it is, it's very, very hard to sort of work out where that is. It's very hard to trace it back, even if you can see where it may emerge. It's very hard to pinpoint where the bad connection is.
So really and truly, at the point of construction, that's when they need to sign off the various Thames Water, whatever, council, planning stage.
Well, it should be the council planner, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing in there that forces them to do that. Is there nothing that forces them to
They're
do that?
supposed to, but
Yeah.
they haven't.
It's a bit like the Environment Agency checking the water quality. It's supposed to happen, but again, I don't know how they suffer from the same problem as the Environment Agency. I suspect that local authorities are really constrained for costs and have very few staff to do these things. Excellent. This is the thing about the Wandle is that it's actually one of the better rivers for an urban chalk stream. There are two in London, urban chalk streams. The Wandle goes through the most populated area. The other one is the Conlon, goes around northwest London and out into the River at Staines. But it's actually a very much loved river, and that was the point I wanted to get across. So people are prepared to volunteer all along its length from local groups, prepared to volunteer and do clean up and do work on the river and the river banks and so forth, and do restoration work on the areas around it. And also that the river, it's very unusual in that it's an urban environment with about 800,000 people thought to live in very close proximity to the Wandle. But the actual the length of the river is very heavily open land and parkland, so it's possible to walk for long stretches along the river before you have to cross a road or something and come out from that environment. So it's actually a sort of welcome relief from urban life, and it's an unexpected sort of pleasure, if you like, certainly for those of us who don't live here and walk along it every day. It's very accessible. And next slide, thanks. So this is to show that the Wandle's held since the 1960s, since the clean-ups have started and been sustained. That all these species have made the Wandle their home. They live in this environment. I'm not proposing to go through all of those and debate them, but the next one, please, Carolyn, shows some of the wealth of wildlife and ecological diversity on the river. And again. If only. I just found this when I was researching it. If you go to the next slide, there was this councillor in Croydon who's a bit of a boy apparently. If you watch his track record, he used the waste incinerator at Beddington. He signed off on 3,000 car parking, concreted over school playing grounds, all sorts of things. But to atone for his sins, he came up with the idea of solar-powered passenger aircraft leaving Gatwick and putting beavers into Wandle Park in Croydon, which you could almost forgive him if he'd actually done it. But anyway, it was just a bit of greenwash. Next, please. So these are the threats that are still survive on the Wandle. The industrial threat is largely gone. The only industrial uses along the river are the waste from industrial plant. But you've still got the rubbish and fly tipping problem, which is prevalent. You've got the road runoff and fine particle deposits. Apparently, if the use of cars on the roads, braking and so forth, it inevitably leads to detritus all over the road. But there's particularly the very fine dust collects, attracts more of the heavy metals and things like that that are used in the manufacture of the vehicles, and that finds its way very quickly into the river. And it collects wherever there's an eddy or a slow flowing part, or before you come to a weir, it will collect in those sort of basins, if you like, in the river. And the risk of being stirred up, if it's stirred up, this particulate releases its toxins into the watercourse. Chemical spills, there was a notorious chemical spill 7 or 8 years ago at Beddington. Again, the same culprit. And the sewage overflows. This is the record for pretty much the last calendar year, for December to December 23. And there was a big deposit just after they finished measuring that as well in the water. So the Wandle is safe, and it needs vigilance, and it needs work to keep the authorities on their toes and to keep the river clean. Go to the next one. That's a couple of people complaining.
Thank you. Thanks.
Excellent.
Me with my poo hat.
And these are just some of the sources I used in looking up that information. Next, please. So Dirty Water Wave 6. Dirty Water is a campaign started in XR. It has an awful lot of allies and fellow contributors from other organisations, like Surfers Against Sewage and so on. But then we've had 5 waves so far of campaigning with a different theme each time or a different emphasis. We're proposing on this wave 6, we're actually being a bit more ambitious. So this is some of the past glories, with the MPs naming the guilty MPs with the blue plaques, which we'll come back to in a bit. Obviously the toilet protest was wonderful, and some of the rather blunt messaging. And that was the Viking ship on the river, which was blaming the sail actually as a blue plaque and blames parliamentarians for causing all those problems. So if we could go to the next one. This has got an awful, wave 6 has got an awful lot of material in it, which is why it's taken us a long time to get it out. We put an awful lot of material, we shifted into the Rebel toolkit because it's reference material. So if you're going to do activities in your local area, that's where to go for the information you might require, depending on what aspect of campaign you pick up. But the idea is that there's a progression through wave 6. So there are personal and local actions, which we'll come to, and we'll look at each of these in a bit of detail. There are ceremonial events which lead from the local actions. And the ceremonial events, again, we'll go into that in some way. There's quite a lot of material on that, which will in turn invite people to come to community assemblies on local water issues. So you pick a theme that's relevant to you. In Richmond, we have an extraction scheme that's starting up above Teddington Lock, where Thames Water proposes to abstract water from the river at that point. It's going to put treatment works and a pumping station onto Ham Lands, which is a site of special scientific interest. It's a nature area, which is like a floodplain for the river at that point. And they're going to pump the water across the headwaters of the River Lee, so like that if you go across London. And they're going to replace the water that they take out at Teddington with treated water, which is going to be the new improved treatment works at Mogden Lane. So our issue is pretty clearly defined, and I'm sure you'll have your own. But as we go around the country, different local groups will have different things to complain about. In a rural area, it might be agricultural runoff is more of a problem than sewage, for instance, or some human waste. And when we get through to the community assemblies, we want to bring the conclusions that people come to locally forwards to shape the Citizens' Assembly on Water, which we want to be UK-wide. And we'll get through the detail of that in a moment. So, next slide. Thanks, Gary. This is a working document. Some of these slides are a bit rough because these are just taken from the document as it is tonight. So, what we're going to do is we're going to provide a whole host of a whole host of information to help the arguments. And we hope you use the pack for putting these alliances together locally where you don't have them already, and also for bringing people into community assemblies and really getting engaged as a community in the state of water in your area. And what we want is to take local actions through the ceremony, through the community assemblies on water, and look towards the Citizens' Assembly. Next, please. So we had a session back at the end of January, early February, where we asked Dirty Water campaigners to just join in. These are the things that they came up with as what they wanted as the main demands from Dirty Water. I think they're pretty very self-explanatory. If you have any questions, I'll take them.
Can I just ask, what response have you had to prevention of discharge and leaks by 2030? I mean,
Well, we won't get it until we've actually done something publicly. We still work when we start wave 6, which is, as I say, I hope it's as soon as next week or the next couple of weeks. Then we'll be looking to get responses to things like community assemblies and ultimately the citizens' assembly.
but is there any plan from the government, the current or the next government, to deal with this?
Not that I can see. They seem to be completely complacent about it. It's like water isn't a problem. I mean, it's only one of the two things that we rely on for life. I mean, it's ludicrous, their whole attitude.
Yeah, I do it.
Go to the next one. Thanks, Karen. We're going to keep these campaigns which are already ongoing, so don't pay for dirty water. For those of you who haven't done it or don't know about it, the idea was that people retain the portion of their bill, water bill, which is allocated to treating sewage, to treating wastewater, and you don't pay it. You only pay the rest of the bill, and you wait until the next bill is due, then you pay your dirty water portion from the original bill, and then you withhold your dirty water portion from the next bill. This is just to disrupt their finances, to be honest, and make them pay attention as water companies. I don't hold out great hope because I think some of these people are beyond reaching them. So.
Yeah, I have tried doing that actually, and then I ended up sending legal letters and debt collectors, so it's not really viable.
It depends how much stomach you've got for it. They can't actually cut you off. Don't forget that. Legally they can't cut you off from water supply.
I think it's the credit rating, but what you can, like you say, ask to be taken off the direct debit.
That's
And
the other
also-
part of it.
oh,
Yeah, sorry. That's the slightly less contentious. It's the easier way to campaign. Is simply to come off the direct debit, because that messes with their finances too. They can't predict when they're going to receive income, and that screws them up. Again, to get their attention. But whether that does any good, it's a moot point. Next slide. Yeah, that pretty much covers the holding payment. Go on to the next one, please. And this is why. I mean, the state of water nationally is just diabolical. I don't know if I even need to rehearse this in this room, but it's beyond outrageous. We make a point about you can't cut off from your water supply. So the water's so important that you can't be cut off from it, but they can't be bothered to clean it up. Next slide. The local actions which we've come up with, there's the new ones. We're going to go around with this, we're going to propose that local groups make their own templates. There's a video on how to do it and everything. And actually paint yellow fish. The idea for yellow fish came from Only Water Down the Drain, which is a campaign that some local authorities have organised, where they paint a yellow fish on the drains at the side of the road and so on, to stop people from putting rubbish and things into drains. So we want to borrow that, but we want to leave it, just have signs appear randomly until we're ready to come out with the next actions, which is ready locally to come out with the next actions, which is the blue plaque for nature. So borrowing from the original blue plaque, naming the negligent MPs. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the corner valve drainage is doing cement down.
Sorry?
Corner valve drainage, you've got builders that keep throwing cement down there.
Yeah.
So there isn't really much you can do about that.
Well, again, I mean, I don't know how the council enforces that. I don't even know if it's Thames Water's responsibility rather than the council.
In Kingston, they have stencils around the drains that say the sea starts here, which I think is really clever because it makes you stop and think. I go, of course it does. This is what it should say.
That's the point. We're just trying to borrow that for a little minute until we get the blue plaques start to appear. The idea of the blue plaques is that the blue plaque will say, will nominate a particular species. It might be a plant, it might be an animal or a fish, it doesn't matter, or an invertebrate. But it just says, this creature used to live in these areas, and now it doesn't anymore. take action, take stock of what we're losing. And the idea is you replicate it for any number of species in your area to make that point about ecological damage.
Would it be a good idea to find out exactly? I mean, I've got a dear friend, he's got a stretch of river on the test, and he's up in arms at the moment, right? All the sewage has been done by sewage. You know, they don't give a shit, literally, because they can take fires. And this is one of the best ecosystems. I'm sorry from a trout fishing point of view, but it's one of the best ecosystems, you know, as all these trout streams are in the world. Would it be, without causing disruption, but more of a point of education, finding a way into every nice part along every river in the southeast, southwest, wherever, and saying, just talking to the landlords and saying, do you want to educate your punters? Have a little board outside your pub saying, Thames Water has dumped 20 million litres of shit into this beautiful river over the last 2 years. And and then that's going to get the public's support. Rather than any form of controversial move, saying you mustn't eat here because, you know, and that's just annoying people, but actually just educating people. And I think that's the way you win the support of the public.
I think that's worth doing. I think also that's for local campaigns, for people to understand that that's a good point at which to reach out to a number of people and to make the effort. I think also along the Wandle, perhaps the message is that you're doing quite well, but you could do better. So it's kind of a slightly different message. The fact that the test is small is appalling.
Anyway.
There are only, just for information, about 210 chalk streams in the world, the whole world. 160 of them are in southern England.
Yeah.
So we've got particular responsibility for these waters. But the idea of blue plaques is to put them up in places. How you make them, and there's different ways of doing it, and you can actually get them printed onto metal if you just share the cost around. It's not very expensive, and you can screw them onto walls or something so they're more or less permanent. It's up to you. It's up to local groups how they do that kind of thing. But you can have temporary ones which come down after a week, and you replace it with another one with another species, make the same message with using a different species. It's an excellent. The point we're trying to build to is the point where we actually have a ceremony about wood, where there's actually a celebration of your water in your community. It might be a river, it might be a lake or pond. It could be a shore if you're in a coastal area. But the idea is to go through a number of things you can do to make a celebration of the river. Is that making sense? We just show these are just for instances, and there's a whole integration into the community's history with the river. And that's the important point to make. That the community, you have a common knowledge, if you're a Wandsworth resident for a long time, you have a common knowledge from your community about the history of the industrial work on the Wandle and what the Wandle meant to the community. When, right back to the times when we used to grow watercress on the Wandle. It's extraordinary. And if you actually embrace that and take it on board, there's an awful lot to teach your community about and also to celebrate in the waterway. And it comes down to there's all sorts of stuff you can use, and we've got suggestions. There are songs. There's the Lost Work Blessing is absolutely amazing, which is from Robert McFarlane's book. It's actually a video of people reciting that poem in a ceremony in Windermere, I think. If we go to the next one. The basis for this was this welcoming the River Wye ceremony. The Wye's being lost to, if you don't know, it's being lost to pollution from chicken farms, factory chicken farming all along its length. And different local authorities have sanctioned these farms, and the runoff has actually killed the Wye. It's choking the weeds don't grow in the Wye. The vegetation is just coated in this effluent. And it's, for such an iconic river, again. It's an absolute disaster. So what they did was a lot of people are very exercised about this all along the length of the Wye, and they held a ceremony in Hereford Town Hall. And in fact, they got the councillors and all sorts of people there. They did it with a pageant. They had mime, they had prayer, they had different religious. The whole every facet of the community that they could get involved, they did. You can see it. You can see it if you click that link. You can see the River Wye ceremonial. But the point is to make the importance of the water to your community and to make that statement and to convey that to people at all levels how important it is. And the idea being that if water is taken, if we take water seriously, then we're prepared to take the action to participate in a community assembly, to bring our opinions into that forum and to express them and to have them collated and sent forward. So the next that one at the bottom is quite interesting too. I don't know how many of you know Paul Powson, some of the XR people might know.
Yeah.
But he lives on the River Wandle on a boat, which is to the east of London, goes up into Suffolk in the end. The Roding's a beautiful river, but again a much abused urban river. It's not George Street. But he started a clean-up campaign on his stretch of the river and got all sorts of people involved. And he's a KC, so he started this Lawyers for Nature, and that's now his practice. And one of the things he advocates, which we touched on in the demands, is this idea of having personhood for a natural entity. So a river has the rights of a person. So the person can't be abused, the person can't be tons of crap or whatever else you might want to, however else you might want to see. Next please, Carol. These were the kind of ideas that were for the ceremonial. So with the goddess of the Wye was a huge creation by an artist called Kim Chaos, which was, I think, the goddess of the Wye is about 10 feet tall or something. It's operated by levers and things inside. It's quite a spectacular piece of work. But the idea is just to feed into people's ideas of how you can enrich the ceremonial in relevant to your community. It might not what is considered, part of the law in rural Herefordshire may not quite obtain it in Wandsworth or in Merton or somewhere. Can we go to the next one, Carol? Sorry. So this is the idea of the citizens of community assemblies. Community assemblies is where people choose to go to an event and choose to participate, as many of you will know. And they're organised on the basis that you accept everybody who comes. You learn, you are taught to listen actively to what people have to say, to pay attention to each other. And the idea is that builds trust. Those are the three pillars of the community assembly, the three fundamentals of all deliberative democratic gatherings. But the idea is that if you do that, you can reach sensible conclusions between you. So if people have different interests, so like if you are a fisherman or you are a kayaker or whatever it might be, you can pool your interests and come together on the central theme of having a clean river to work with. And the idea is that this would lead to the Citizens' Assembly on water. So if we can go on to the next slide, I'll come to how that's organised. In the Citizens' Assembly, stop me if you know all this stuff already, please, because I've just got about it. But in a Citizens' Assembly, you have a what's called sortition. So an objective organisation with no axe to grind, no skin in the game of the subject to hand, actually goes around and uses the sortition algorithm to select people according to a number of categories. So if, for instance, you've got an income category, there'll only be one person who's a multi-millionaire in the room out of 100 people, for instance. So you'll get different proportions of people according to income bands that they set. You can do it according to ethnicity, to religion, to educational attainment, a whole host of things. And all this cross-section works, so you get a representative portion of your society. If this is done, it will be a national campaign. And the idea was the motion, which the Citizens' Assembly is perfectly free when they convene to change. They can come up with their own motion. But their suggestion is how do we want our water managed? So the focus is on the management of water delivery in the UK, would be the idea. And in doing that, you have to focus on the regulation of it. You have to focus on the mandate that a water company might have from its society, from its communities, and also the standards and values that you set for that entity to perform. So the idea is that we build an alliance campaign. So it's not this isn't an XR thing. This has its own branding and everything else. It's the campaign for water, or whatever we want to call it. We appoint the neutral third party to run it. We crowdfund the campaign, so we actually pay people to do the campaign. It's the idea, full salary. They're on it full time for a 6-month sprint to get this over the line. And we crowdfund the assembly itself. We don't want any no interference in vested interests or politicians, and that's crucial. We can't let politicians near it. They can't shape an agenda or decide who the speakers are, the expert speakers who address the forum. We want to be able for people to choose that themselves ultimately. But we do want from them, and before we go ahead with this, we want a commitment from the major political parties actually to respond. And unless they've given a commitment to respond, we won't go ahead with the citizens' assembly because it won't mean anything. We have to follow through from what the recommendations that body comes up with to see that those recommendations have some force, have some effect. The idea is that we build, by funding, we build a level of support which is demonstrable. By opinion polling through the campaign, we build a level of support which is demonstrable. And that's compelling when you're going to address political parties. So that if they know there's a level of support and interest, they're feeling obliged to respond because they feel threatened.
I totally get that, but I think your point number 4, if you've got a politician on the side, surely that's going to be in your interest.
If they can participate without poking away at it to start to compromise the process, that's the point we want to make.
Yeah.
But as a member of society, of course, they behave themselves. Can we go to the next one? And so during the Citizens' Assembly, these are the subjects we'll address. It's spelled out to us in, no mean terms that conservation is also one of the major issues here. Because with our cycle at the moment of wet winters and dry summers, we may well find ourselves running out of water. We're not capturing the water that falls. So you come up with the preferred form of water governance. We can talk about any. You have an improved private model, so you have still a privatised industry, but you just improve it with regulation and requirements that you build around it. You could have completely nationalised industry, which didn't really work very well in the decades for 100 years before 1989 when water was privatised. Because the infrastructure was completely neglected under their regime as well, so there's no really, I've got no action about nationalised industry. You could have municipal model, which is what they favour in places like Paris has one, for instance, where the municipality or the local authorities as a group in an area or a region actually own 51% of the company. So that whatever the privatised portion is, they can't set prices and things like that without reference to an elected authority. You could have, what are the other ones? You could have a cooperative arrangement for a water authority, workers cooperative that reports, that just meets service levels to an agreed standard. But you could have a not-for-profit that answers to a regularly annually convened assembly of citizens, so that they have to account for their performance in the year up to that point, and plans are set and revised accordingly to citizens. And you're never dealing with the same group of people, because the citizens are freshly elected each year to receive that report, would be an idea. That hasn't been done anywhere, I can't point to that, that sounds like a good idea. But the point is, water is the commons. It's as much our right as the air or the land. These are the things which we're preparing information on. I don't propose to go through these in detail, but just to give you a sort of idea of the scope of it. The information that feeds into the assembly. So we're talking about the social justice aspect of it. Are you happy with that? We'll go to the next slide. Sorry, speak. You want to read it? But this is just stuff we're working with, and this will all be, when it's resolved, will all be in the Rebel toolkit.
Steve, can I just-
1 in 16 households here live in water poverty.
Yeah.
That's revolting.
Yeah.
How do you define water poverty?
The cost of water makes up more than 5% of their income.
It's, for instance, where you've got some of those meters that they installed to ratchet up bills. They're probably not charging you what they should be charging you. You're paying extortionate amounts of water.
Isn't that the responsibility of the household to work out that they're not? Well, I live on a farm, and we've got to take the word of the farmer about that our meter's right.
Mm.
And I read it once a year, and I have to go down a well to get to it. Don't get me started on that issue, but and I take his word for it. We seem to be paying what we expect to pay, but I've no idea if it's what we should be
I
paying.
don't think everybody's that competent about it. Also, I live on a boat, so I have to go there. I have to pay whatever the boat yard charges me.
Yeah, sure.
But I just fill the tank once a month, and that's it. So I don't think about that component of my rent and the boat yard.
Would you be able to make the slides available afterwards?
Sure, yeah.
That's, I think,
So these, as I say, I do stress these are working. Right, you will actually get the cleaned up version will be in the Rebel toolkit when we launch. So go to the next one, thanks. This is trying to engage with issues that came up. You may remember the case of Zane, who was killed when Marshall and Simon escaped from a buried rubbish tip, which they didn't know about in the house, or they weren't told about when they bought the house. And the fumes killed the little boy in his house. That's down in the States. We'll come back to Thames Water in a moment. You'll enjoy that. But these are how we define it to extinction prevention. Tell the truth back now. Decide to go. Yeah, this is Thames Water. They're more concerned about profit and trading than they are about actually supplying the commodity that they're supposed to supply. I don't know how much of this needs rehearsing, you're probably all familiar with.
really good actually if you just spelled that out a little bit, 'cause it's quite complicated and quite shocking.
Okay, the Thames, well, I won't summarise the slide as much as this. Thames Water actually makes money from big capital projects. All the water companies do. Because when they come to fund a big capital project, they announce borrowing. And they recover that they borrow so in order that they can continue to pay dividends and bonuses to shareholders. It's estimated that they could fund all these projects with the income they receive from us water bill payers if they didn't invest in that amount of debt. But of course the debt is attracting massive interest, and the servicing of the debt and the interest payments is all loaded onto the water bills going in the years going forward from that time. For instance, the Thames Super Cylinder favourite. Yes, it cleans up a large part of the River Thames, no doubt. But it doesn't do anything about the sewage flowing down from Oxford, from Reading, from Henley, from Walton-on-Thames, from Hampton, from Mogden Lane. That's all still in the river. And whatever's in Beddington, unless it's plumbed into the Thames sewer, that will be going into a waterway every time that overflows as well. So, to that extent, how clean is the river? And it's not, of course, it's not dealing with agricultural runoff or chemical pollution and all the other things. But they made a fortune out of actually incurring the debts for the construction of that project. And they continue to pay their shareholders dividends all the while that construction was going on, and they could have funded it out of their own money. But they haven't shown the responsibility to take that on, take that on as payments as they should. And the other thing is, of course, it's as old. I mean, even when the water company companies are being privatised and the railways are being privatised, people are saying this. How can you have privatised monopolies? If you've got a monopoly service in the area in which you operate, so if you're South West Trains or you're Thames Water, where's the competition? How's that supposed? You're not supposed to have privatised enterprises without direct competition, forcing them to modify prices and to compete and maintain standards and so on.
What is the answer to that?
No, the answer to that is that you can't have two suppliers of water to your house. So you have to have public control. In our opinion, you have to have public control over that supplier. So it probably rules out the privatised option when the citizens debate it. These were just themes to build the ceremonial side of it. But the diagram is rather unfortunate because that's all the water in the world in the larger bubble. Sorry, in comparison to the smaller bubble, which is all the fresh water in the world. Unfortunately, situated it to the map is of the Atlantic, and the Great Lakes are in the background, which kind of suggests that there's more fresh water than that symbol represents. So I'm sorry about the graphic. But these are just quotes. I was reading Frank Herbert, I was reading Dune, which I've never read, the original book. And when I came to that passage and we were writing the dirty water stuff, it just seemed that was a completely apt way of showing the response to water that human beings can have. Dune is a desert planet, effectively, with a basic water. Next slide. And this is trying to convey the water. This is the sort of response that people have to water in every aspect, whether it's for recreation, for commerce, for marvelling at the wildlife in the water. The whole imagery of water is woven into our fabric of our being. And of course, that's not surprising because that is our being. We are 59%, it declines a little bit more as you get older, but you're basically roughly 59% water. And our brains are 80% water. Please. So these are just stuff which is to inform we'll as I say, we'll develop these in the toolkits to inform people's local group thinking about the campaigns they can organise and the actions they can undertake. We'll be quoting more sources on this. The Natural History Museum, this is a report from I think 2 or 3 years ago, which was assessing the state of water ecology. We're creating this. This is just the information for the campaign, which I've been reiterating, is to say that we're creating a campaign to a body of information which will inform the different aspects you want to address in local campaigns. And again, this is I don't know anything like this slide, but this is just to show that we're preparing posters, flyers, leaflets, stickers, all the templates, how to make templates for videos and so forth, and they'll be available on the Russian toolkit again. And finally, just a couple of slides to finish up. This is actually a poetry competition which is underway at the moment, which is about chalk streams. I don't know whether people here know about this. They're inviting anybody, any of us, to submit a poem on a chalk stream. And if you go to the next slide, the idea is that it will be, there's actually going to be a competition where these are judged over 18 and under 18 categories. And Robert McFarlane will be judging and presenting the prizes when that comes up.
When is that?
Deadline the end of the month.
When is that?
I've got my creative juices flowing now. I can do it.
We'll lock something else tonight.
We will. We'll rustle something up.
And as this is happening, again, it's imminent, and I knew nothing about this until this morning when I added this slide, because Juliette told me about it at the action we were at today. This is actually happening, and it's the UK River Summit, and it's on your doorstep. So
Oh my God.
you have to apparently you have to go on. I think there's an Eventbrite booking system. You book a ticket to attend.
I think I saw this, and I seem to remember the tickets were like 40 quid.
Are they? I don't know anything
I'm
about it.
sure we looked at it, and I can remember, I may be wrong, but I can remember seeing things, thinking, oh, that'd be quite good. And then it's thinking, well, £40, I don't know what's, that seems to me like that's privatisation or whatever, but I don't know.
It does sound like some people aren't welcome in it.
Yeah.
I may be wrong, but I don't want to, I definitely saw something, I think it was a bit more than the hall, and it was like, I should have checked.
It's next
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah. They're convening. There's two more. It's a worldwide thing, celebrating rivers in different countries. I think there's one in America. I seem to remember. I had a brief look at the site, but I haven't had time today. I'm afraid.
Maybe we should have a little Twitter story if it's a day of celebrating rivers.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame we're not a bit more coordinated with the event. Really, could have done something quite good for it.
40 quid.
It is.
It's sponsored by August. I think we have a kind of a high quality fishing gear. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not happy, are they?
No.
Is it an all-day event?
Yeah, it's sponsored by a fly fishing gear company. So it's,
Okay. It's weird that it should be on a school day in term time and that a week day of that. So it's anyway.
Good ground fishing. No? Do you think?
So,
Fishing people would be.
we're all up and running about what's happening.
Yeah, no.
Angling is an amazing constituency for support in these issues.
Yeah.
We embrace it. I mean, it's the chairman of the, you may know this, the chairman of the angling body in the UK is Charles Wheeler, he's a Tory MP. I think he's more concerned about angling than he is about his politics, which might be an interesting one to explore.
We met some anglers, didn't we, when we were doing outreach down by that supermarket? Yeah, no, by that supermarket, that bridge. Yeah, we met some anglers then who were fishing on the Wandle, which I always think is amazing. People fishing on the
In
Wandle.
London,
Yeah,
Well, easy to fish there.
I didn't like to ask.
There's a picture that I was looking it up. There was a picture of a guy holding a big carp that he caught in the Wandle. I mean, there's obviously you're fishing for brown trout in the Wandle these days, so
Yeah,
it's pretty impressive.
it is.
I didn't realise it was the second biggest sport in the UK.
I thought it was the biggest actually, the biggest
It is,
participation.
it is, yeah. Fishing. And angling is fly fishing, but angling fishing is a role.
Yeah, of course it should.
Wow.
Yeah, if you live right here, you know much doubt about it. It's the banks are covered with fishermen.
Are they all in XR?
Well, I don't think they are. No, I don't have that impression.
Should they be?
Yeah.
We'll be trying. They're they catch some big fish in the Thames, and I don't know how dirty the Thames is, to be honest with you. I mean, we know the volume of pollution that goes into it from the sewage works. We don't really know the volume of pollution from agricultural runoff, pesticides, insecticides, and all that stuff. And yet there are still some very large fish in there. I don't know how they survive. But we don't have eels anymore, which is distressing.
It's a lot healthier than it used to be, but it's still not healthy.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't think I need to try it, I caught it at the time.
We used to swim in it all the time, but we haven't done that for 10 years anymore. Yeah.
It's probably dirty, it's empty, but yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit of a trot through. Do you have any questions for?
Because I wasn't quite clear that was the aim, so thank you so much. That was me.
is via the Rebel Toolkit, which is off Extinction Rebellion's website or something.
No, there's a Rebel Toolkit. There's a Dirty Water campaign. I don't know what the
Money
division's called.
rebellion.
No, it's
No.
not. It's under campaigns. So you go to campaigns and there's Dirty Waters in there, and then under Dirty Water there are various chapters. So each of the preceding campaigns, there's an information area. There's a whole host of things, and you'll find Wave 6 in there when it's released, and then under there you can find the different aspects.
So that's on XR's website.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If you don't know the Rebel Toolkit, it is a wonderful thing. I know it sounds quite pedestrian, but there's so many resources on there, from everything from
I haven't read it.
data, statistics, leaflets that you can download, job descriptions, pretty much everything is on there.
Because a bit like the last talk on the air, this is kind of gold dust, all this information. isn't
Yeah,
it? It's just trying to
absolutely.
synthesise it and get it in the right place.
Absolutely.
To tell
Yeah.
people we can tell about it.
It's incredible that there's 160, the number of chalk streams, 200
210 worldwide.
worldwide.
160.
River Wandle is one of them.
I think the rest are in northern
Yeah.
France.
So I'm not sure that's true. I think they are in northern France, but I think they're also in that area in the north, the west of Slovenia on the Italian border, which is the Karst region there.
Mm.
And I think there's a couple in County Clare in Ireland on the borough.
Oh, right,
I
okay.
think.
Yeah.
So what is it that's so unique about the geography of the southern England that makes them so concentrated?
It's the chalk, and it's where the water comes through the soil, through the rock, and it's filtrated. So it's the purest of water.
Yeah.
And it
It's
never
because
drops.
chalk is a really good filter of
Yeah.
water.
And it's also very mineral rich because the chalk, the water draws out minerals from the chalk, and it's sort of extracted by any other sort of surface that it flows over. What happens with the Wandle is that the chalk in the North Downs is where the water rises. I mean, it falls down and it falls into essentially a run which is lined, if you like, by nature, but it's lined by Thames clay, estuarial clay, so that the water can't go down, but it doesn't interact with the clay as such, so the water retains its purity, or should retain its purity until it reaches the Thames. It's quite fascinating. I think there's 4 different designations of what is a chalk stream, but the one that constitutes one because it rises. It's aquifer. It's fed from an aquifer in a limestone region.
So the water falls on the North Downs, filters through, comes out.
When it meets a rock other than chalk, when it meets a rock that isn't permeable, then the water will flow along the permeable rock, and that's what causes the outflow. There's some beautiful streams around London. The Chess that flows into the coal near Richmond in northwest London. That's quite a beautiful stream, but that's getting polluted now by water. There's a big chess conservation scheme underway, which is led by academics from Queen Mary University, actually, in the East End. But they're regularly testing the water there and tracking the runoff. And there's a village to the west of London in the Chilterns, where they've had overflows and floods, and the sewage has been backing up through the town, polluting another chalk stream that flows out. I think it's Chalfont St Peters. I may be wrong on that, but they've had a problem that Thames Carnival won't resolve. So they're actually extracting the sewage in trucks, and they're trucking it away all the time, right through the middle of the village.
24/7.
Yeah.
These people have to live with the sound of pumps sucking the sewage out of the drains. Yeah.
So, I'm just struck, this is probably a really silly question, but if you think of the Wandle, which is 12 miles long, it's fast flowing, and it has a continuous supply of very pure water. So sewage discharges are going into it all the time. Where is the Wandle polluted as it keeps on flowing? Would the water be polluted, and how does it become polluted, or is it the Thames which retains it more? that would then just feed into polluting the Thames or eventually to polluting the sea? I mean, where does the pollution end or stay, or why does it stay a fast flowing river?
Well, because the river, even though a river is designated as fast flowing, it's not fast flowing in every stretch. So where it bends and where it has eddies and leads of land which intervenes into the river and so forth, you'll have slack water in those areas, and the deposits of not so much sewage pollution, but also these the road runoff chemicals can build up in those areas in the silt. And if the silt is disturbed then by a subsequent heavy rainfall or whatever it might be, then that stuff comes back into the river, is activated in the river again.
And it also, in those slow running bits, it kills, it builds up, it kills the vegetation. So it kills all the wildlife within the group.
And obviously fish species in particular rely on those slow flowing areas because that's where they breed, that's where they hatch their young and so forth.
Sewage works, when they treat sewage, what happens to it and where does it go?
Well, the
I
sewage,
know nothing about it.
It's into the rivers at the moment.
the sewage is
No, what
supposed,
should happen to it, right?
the sewage is supposed to be treated in beds, in filtration beds,
Yeah.
so that the actual solids and everything else are taken out, and the water is purified as it passes through the filtration system, and it's then recirculated as drinking water. So I'm sure you've heard the idea that every glass of water you drink in London has been drunk 12 times before, but that's the way it's supposed to be. What happens is they have holding tanks for sewage, which are under capacity, and they don't have what's sufficiently wide sewage system, sewers to bring the sewage, to collect the sewage in the first place, and they're subject to your fatbergs and all the rest of it. So what happens is that the sewage storage tanks overflow, and when they overflow, the water goes into the combined sewage outflow, the combined water outflow pipes, and it just washes out into the river as the stormwater would itself off the roads and so forth. So if you live where I do, you have these outflow pipes which are sealed, which open out that way. And the minute there's heavy rain, you just see that the cover opens up and it's just a torrent of water pouring into the river. Well, where we live near Twickenham, we've got Mogden Lane, and Mogden just overflows all the time. There's a river that goes around, it's a man-made river that flows around Mogden Lane sewage works and goes down through Isleworth to the Thames. It's called the Duke of Northumberland's Canal or something like that, Duke of Northumberland's River. And it was created to power water mills in 200 or 300 years ago. And this flows around the back of Mogden Lane. The water just overflows from the sewage tanks. The sewage washes out into the Duke of Northumberland's River and flows down. And there's a street with a row of terraced houses that backs onto this Duke of Northumberland's River. It was about 10 years ago now, that was completely flooded. All the ground floors of the houses were flooded. The sewage just burst over the banks and just flooded the gardens and into the ground floor of the houses. And it was an absolute nightmare. But that's just our area that I know about. The Wandle has actually been prone to flooding for all its history, particularly down in Morley. And I don't know what effect that would have. You're a bit fortunate because I say the Wandle is bordered by so much open land and parkland that in a sense that can offer for as a sort of small floodplain for the river. But there are other areas where the houses come quite close to the river, obviously, and I don't know what that matters for. They have dug channels out of the Wandle to make it deeper in those areas. I know that in the past. Where you see those dividing lines, there's a concrete wall in parts of the Wandle that go down the middle of the river. Where they dammed one side of the river, dredged it out, dug it deep and dug the bottom of the river out, opened it up and did the same on the other side of that wall. That was the idea. That's the idea of that wall. They never took the wall back.
Does the going bust of water companies like Thames Water provide a sort of opportunity for renationalisation on the cheap because they would have gone bust or not really?
When you try to organise a citizens' assembly and try not to adopt a point of view, it's weird, but we all have our views quite strongly. But but you don't. You try not to put your view into the city. It's for the citizens to decide. Having said that, my own view would be they don't deserve any compensation. They could be taken over because they're derelict in every possible way.
Right.
They haven't invested, they haven't done the things they promised to do, and they haven't lived up to the implicit standards of running a water system. Therefore, I don't see how they're entitled to any compensation.
No, the shareholders shouldn't be either.
No, exactly, the shareholders.
They're all taking the whole thing. They're all in foreign countries. You're taking a perfectly well-working business, saddled it with debt, and here we are. And
extracted all the
dividends. They're taking all that. So,
huge payouts already, so we've had that.
Thames is the worst example.
The money be taken back.
Shareholders should be accountable.
Yeah, they should. Like Lloyd's, they should be shareholders, people. They should be accountable. They should have to give the money back.
Yeah.
Thames has 15 million customers, 15 million household businesses, whatever, that pay water bills, and it's by far the biggest water authority in the UK. But the Thames shareholding is something like 8 or 9. It's a closed shareholding. None of us can go and buy a share in Thames Water. It's a closed shareholding on the stock exchange. And these 9 companies, I think one of them may be British. They tend to be pension funds, which creates enormous conflict because they're actual pension funds in Germany, in Canada. There's an Abu Dhabi wealth fund that's invested in it. I think there's a pension fund in Hong Kong, another in Singapore, from memory. And they're actually paying people's pensions out of the money that they're making out of share. So we have quite a conflict of interest to unravel there in what the pension funds do with their money and how pensioners continue to be supported, continue to be paid if they haven't got this source of income coming in. But there's the conflict is where the people are deriving their pensions from the running down of the water infrastructure.
Royal London, I think, is also a
Which one?
Royal London, yeah, and so probably people have pensions.
Some of the other water companies, I say they're not as bad in the sense that some of the other companies are actually open on the stock exchange. So the average person can buy shares in, I think, United Utilities and some of the others. They have horrendous pollution records, but the fact is that their ownership is a little less opaque. There's a graph, I didn't put this in actually, I should have done. There's a graph that shows how many layers that the water company is owned within. The Thames is only about 4 or 5 only. It was worse when Macquarie, the Australian company, ran it, but they were kicked out about 15 years ago. And now they've reappeared as a major shareholder in Southern Water, I think. They're just a cannibal, vampire hedge fund, the worst kind of, asset stripping. But there's another company which has 10 layers of ownership over and above the actual water providing company. And money simply changes hands between these companies. And private deals are done within this structure. And then those deals are repaid at ridiculous amounts of interest and so on. So even if you're saying you're not paying a dividend, you're paying such a, the loan providers are getting such an extortionate rate of return on their loans that they might as well be getting a dividend for it.
It's another reason to decarbonise your pension, make your money matter, because otherwise you're complicit in these things when
You're not really, because you only have a very limited say in where your pension's invested, don't you? I mean, I remember the company where I took my pension out with, we could invest in a sort of broad range, make it greener or something. They wouldn't invest in hydrocarbon companies. Didn't really have a say about where they did invest it within that category,
And actually, just thinking about, I was talking about a private pension, but thinking about it, so I'm in a green in inverted commas fund, but actually I should look at it because it could be water, and in fact, we're so obsessed with the oil and gas industry and not investing in that. There are other industries like Thames Water and like water that's something I should really look at. Everything's street.
Do you think the super plan is going to be improving this?
It will be taking an enormous amount of sewage out of the system,
Yeah.
sewage from London itself. But for instance, Mogden Lane to the west of London has an estimated 2 million people that the waste is disposed of at Mogden Lane. And Mogden Lane will flow into the Thames, irrespective, because it's upriver from the super sewer. So the super sewer won't collect any outflow from those sites, which is why I say all the sites upriver aren't affected by the super sewer.
Where's Mogden Lane?
Mogden Lane is in Islip. It's round the back of Twickenham Road.
Is the super sewer just a big pipe, or is it also increasing capacity to actually filter the waste that we were talking about?
What they did was they invested a huge amount in refurbishing the sewage works at Beckton in the east of London, and they had a pipe that flows from a place called Abbey Mills on the River Lee to Beckton, and then they built the super sewer to meet the Beckton pipe at Abbey Mills. I think that's right. And then they have a number of feeds. I think there's something like 37 feeds along the river, picking up sewage outflows from sewage treatment works along the Thames. From Hammersmith, Acton, there's a storage tank in Acton which they pick up at Hammersmith, and then it goes from just below, downriver of Hammersmith Bridge, almost next to Hammersmith Bridge, right the way down to Beckton or via Abbey Mills. And they have there's a continuous fall over the length of the pipe, so as the direction of flow is achieved. And they have a sort of pretty souped up ventilation system. They pump air in at 2 locations. No, they pump air out at 2 locations, through a filtration system, so it doesn't smell too bad. And then all the other entry ventilation points, as the air sucked out, they fill with fresh air, keep things relatively sweet until it gets to Beckton. But the idea is that it's filtered at Beckton, and at Beckton the wastewater is pumped out into the river, into the estuary to go out to sea. The river's pretty wide out there. It's below, if you know that part of the world, it's below the barrier, the Thames barrier.
But it is treated then. Not just pumped out untreated.
Would it be also an effort for the campaign to push people to obviously release less wastewater? I mean, we obviously all use too much water in, obviously, and all this comes out.
And there's an extraction problem,
Yeah, and so if we were all using half the amount of water that we're currently using, probably Thames water could handle the peaks that they today can't handle.
Well, boat owners have done this for a while, because you have to have pump out, you have to have a dirty tank in the boat, and then you have to go and get that pumped out at certain locations, which become rarer. So what we've done is generally to install composting toilets in boats. The idea is you have a dry composting toilet where you separate liquids and solids, point of entry, and you actually ventilate your liquids tank, so you actually vent it to the outside. You have a fan, and you can put a small heater in there to make sure it's evaporating properly. And the solids are just treated as they just degrade in the compost. You just change the compost once a year or something, and that's the crudest form of doing it. There are more sophisticated systems. But my contention isn't personal. That's not a dirty water campaign issue. But if you're going to campaign for re-insulating people's houses, retrofitting houses with insulation and so on, and you're going to look at putting in heat pumps into people's houses, and in other words, replumbing most of their heating systems with radiators, you could put extra radiators in for a heat pump and so forth. If you're going to do all that, the cost of actually putting in composting toilets into people's houses isn't very great on top of that bill. So why wouldn't you do that? Why would you flush drinking water down the toilet, which is what you're doing every time you flush the loo? It's an unconscionable waste of water. And of course, if you've got composting loos everywhere, your sewage quantities are not massively reduced.
And that's not part of the campaign.
Isn't it?
Well, no, because to get that, if you've got into a citizens' assembly, so for instance, you're considering water, saving water, here's an option. And have somebody who knows what they're talking about explain what how composting toilet works, what it would mean in terms of replumbing your house. But only water that would be coming out of households then would be grey water, bath water, and washing machines, things like that.
I don't know if that's the bulk. I don't know with the proportion today. Is it like toilet water versus shower?
I don't know how that's calculated.
Yeah.
I've not seen the calculation for that. It's a good point, though. But you've got people who are putting bricks into their systems now, so they actually use less water in the toilet.
Yeah. Well, some people use their grey water for their flush.
That
They can put like some.
would be another option as well. Yeah, grey water can be used for a variety of things. You can water your garden, things like that. They wash the car with it. I mean,
It's very wasteful, isn't it? When you just said that you're flushing the loo with drinking water.
yeah.
When you think of it like that, and you have that kind of, that's awful.
Yeah.
Or you're drinking water with flushing. You can also
I mean, I wouldn't drink out of the loo.
It's the same quality of water.
But it's coming off the mains. It's drinking water.
Yeah, it is.
You would hope it's drinking water.
And I guess it's going to have to be more and more something we think about water, to think about conserving water, because clearly, globally, there's going to be a water shortage.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's raining a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean it. You say if it all runs away, and then we have droughts. So obviously there's a thing about keeping the water, conserving it better, but also, learning to use less, which is,
See you later.
Sorry to go there. Thank you very much for your interest. Thanks.
There is a program about water conservation. It's a film you can watch on YouTube. You may have seen it on television. It's about this guy in Australia, in the west of New South Wales, who was running his family business was a stud farm breeding horses. And he was getting the creek and everything dried up right through his land and through his neighbour's land, dried up every summer when the weather got really hot. And they were showing.
I'll be back in a second, but this bike is attached to my bike, so.
And what this guy did, he became obsessed with how to keep his land hydrated, to keep a certain level of water in the soil effectively. So where the creek had been straightened and its course all interfered with, he re-interfered with it. He started dropping boulders into the creek to make the creek flow sideways and flow in loops. And you're not supposed to do this in Australia, which I didn't know, but willow is a forbidden species. You're not allowed to plant willow. But he did anyway. He planted willow along the banks of his watercourse. And he came up with every scheme. He rebeds, all sorts of vegetation schemes that he could think of to capture water, hold water in the river in the dry weather. To the extent that they took an aerial photograph of his land in the dry season, and everywhere else was brown and parched, no grass. And his section, you could almost draw a line around it, where his boundaries were, was completely green. And he was showing how what the hydration meant, that you could press the soil to a certain extent before your finger became wet with the water in the soil. His stud farm went bust because he'd done so much study of water and got so obsessed with it that he neglected his main business. But he then got hired by a guy in South Australia who obviously had the same problems. And this guy actually gave him carte blanche and a big budget to sort of do the same thing for his land. So he moved over there, he achieved the objective without all the trial and error this time. He knew what he was doing. And it became actually standard policy in Australian agriculture about how you handle watercourses, and you re-engineer, you allow watercourses to go back to their original flow, and you pay attention to the vegetation and so forth that you use around them to retain water in the land. It's a fascinating film. If you're interested, I'll fish it up. I'll send it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to watch that. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's we're not having to end, but I still might want to get back to talking at some point. So have other people got more questions or things to add? Interesting conversation, but
what's relevant to this area and what your community, you feel would work in your community, and then be a sort of index reader of the toolkit and just get what you need from different bits of it, rather than try and plough through the whole thing, because, as you say, it will get very heavy very quickly.